There's a difference between creating a great product and creating a great company. And that's figuring out the business model and the distribution
Yeah.
before the window of opportunity closes.
Hi, everyone. This is Amar. Excited to welcome you back to another episode of Peer Review. Today, we have Yvonne Wassenaar with us. She's a visionary leader and accomplished executive who spent a lot of time in the DevOps, dev tooling, a variety of different spaces. Welcome, Yvonne.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Just to tell you a little bit more. So Yvonne has been spending a lot of time recently on board of directors. She's actually on the board of directors of a bunch of really well-known and preeminent organizations like Rubrik, JFrog, Arista, Forrester Research. Recently, she joined the boards of Infoblox and Braze. So I think she's really seeing across a number of amazing companies about what's happening in terms of data, dev tools, and developer DevOps. She was formerly the CEO of Puppet as well. I know there's probably a lot of Puppet fans out there. And then before that, she's had senior roles at New Relic and VMware. Beyond her professional achievements, Yvonne is a strong advocate for diversity, inclusion, and mentorship, inspiring the next generation of leaders in technology. So welcome, Yvonne. So maybe the first question I have for you is really about what are some of the game-changing use cases you're seeing in AI, given your incredible purview as a board member across so many amazing companies?
Yeah, there are a lot of people focusing on where is AI having the most impact today, or where is it going to be most transformational? And if I take a step back and think about that question at two layers, at the application layer, which is where most people focus, I don't think we're there yet. There are some really interesting things
Yeah.
that are happening in drug discovery and healthcare and biotech, where having more intelligence to put at the problem in the same way is having great impact. And that's super exciting. But beyond that, I think we're still finding our way at the application level, that we're still kind of trying to do the same work, but with more horsepower. And there's probably fundamentally different ways to do the work. At the same time, if we go down to the infrastructure layer, we're really starting to see some very exciting changes and evolution. So I know a lot of the media is focused on NVIDIA and all the great things that NVIDIA can do, and NVIDIA is going to rule the world forever. I'm a bit biased. I do sit on the board of Arista Networks, but I think InfiniBand will have use cases. But as we get Ethernet and we get new chips that are designed by some of the startups that are coming out, when we think about actually designing chips for Gen AI specifically, so GPUs were actually designed for gaming, so they do great things, but we can do even more at the infrastructure level, and we'll start seeing more being done on the edge with different power consumption. Like, everybody's freaked out about power, but we're innovating to figure out how we need less power, how we can be more specific. So I actually think some of the most exciting work right now is still being done, as people call it, the picks and shovels level, of how do we actually create the foundation. And then the real game changers in the application level will come as we sort those things out.
And so actually just on that, in terms of the application level, what do you think's holding us back right now? I mean, that I think it's fair that the promise of this killer apps, it's coming and it's starting to happen, but it's not like everybody's using all these apps all the time.
Yeah. I think some of it is, it's very hard, particularly in the enterprise, but even in our own daily lives, to do something different. We're very habitual creatures. We have lots of calcified processes and ways of working in the enterprise. And people don't really like change. They say they do, but they don't really. And so to begin with, it is very hard to make differentiated transformational change in an organization, particularly if it means you need different people and different structures with different compensation. That all takes a long time to happen. But even beyond that, I don't know that we yet have really been able to dream of what's possible. And I'll give you the example of the cloud. Like, when AWS first came on the scene, everybody thought the greatness of moving to the cloud is you could run your infrastructure more simply and at lower cost. But the real brilliance of the cloud is what we're seeing now, is that when you have this aggregated compute, you can do transformationally different things. You can create digital twins. You can bring learning and insights at a level and scale that'd be very hard to do if you were constrained to your own data center. And so I think a similar thing is going to happen in the AI space, which is right now we're still doing the same stuff we've always done. We're just doing it better, smarter, cheaper,
Right.
at least for us, not the foundation model builder. And we have yet to really think about how we can fundamentally, in a differentiated way, create the next Uber of getting from point A to B. Like that type of reimagining hasn't really happened yet.
That's an interesting point. I think we saw that as like when we first launched one of our products, like our chat product, it was a little bit like, I thought, oh, everyone will adopt this, but it just takes people time to, like you said, change their behavior, or get used to a different way. People have been using Google for 25 years, so they're just used to searching for things that way. And that's a paradigm that so many people are trained on.
And I think building on that, like if you think about the Excel spreadsheet as a model, like the Excel spreadsheet was to be a massive unlock for people in finance. And I think in many regards over time was, you could add, subtract, divide. Some people learned how to do pivot tables. Some people learned how to do macros. But it took a long time for finance organizations to fundamentally rethink what they were going to do. And almost the greater power was the kind of empowerment of the masses to do some of the basic financial things that historically used to turn to somebody else to get done. And so I can see a similar thing happening in the world of AI, where we sit here and say, okay, I used to have to go have a research assistant do this, or I used to have to
Right.
go ask
Right.
this other department to go do this. Now I'm much more empowered.
Yeah.
And I think when I look at your worlds, people have talked about democratizing developers and low code, no code being the real freedom. Everybody can write code. I actually think Gen AI is what's probably ultimately going to give us that ability to have more people writing code, but they're doing it in plain English. And so there'll have to be people behind the scenes who are figuring out all the background mechanisms for how that works. But I think in some regards, we're going to see much broader reach of people who are building software concepts and components and wiring into many more aspects of the business than we have today, because today we're so resource constrained.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody who said that they think maybe we'll move to a model where you have these prompt engineers who are providing high level instructions, a plan, structure that's well communicated, get the version of code out, maybe do some tinkering. But then you have, so for maybe every 3 of those people, you have one person who really understands the code well and can then go in and troubleshoot and figure things out and get that last mile done of getting it to work. Like you said, I think a lot of these things are going to kind of change.
And just taking that, like further, if we look at how large enterprise organizations run today, we've taken a lot of the infrastructure burden out of the developers' purview, and we have platform teams.
Right.
And developers get a level of abstraction so they can do what they do best. And exactly what you said, you're seeing a smaller group of folks with more specialized tools, creating that capability, the stuff that still needs to get done, but they make it easier and more scalable for everybody else.
Right. So just kind of continued specialization, maybe in a way, leveraging these new. Yeah. Okay. Very cool. So maybe if you look at a couple of the companies you're on the board of, like what impact is Gen AI having on some of these companies, and especially maybe their engineering teams or their customers, especially if you think about things like JFrog and whatnot, maybe Arista, Rubrik, who a lot of their customers are actually engineers.
Yeah, all the companies, because I work all in tech, the engineers are definitely using some version of developer copilot. You can pick your flavor of the day to help them with their individual tasks. Most, if not all, of the companies have built out various versions of their own chatbot to make it easier to get information inside the company on what needs to get done. Most of them have started to build out similar type of AI technology to help their customers. So if you look at Rubrik, they've got Ruby, which is really to help their customers better utilize the Rubrik technology. And though it's interesting in the world that I live in, if you look at Arista, obviously they're helping build out a lot of the next generation networking for AI. So Arista is a phenomenal networking company. They have historically been the provider to a lot of the networking capabilities of what they call the cloud titans. So Metas of the world's, Microsoft's, helping them really build out at massive scale the data center capabilities that they have as a product to their end customers. And more recently, they've started expanding into the enterprise and the campus. In the world of AI, Andy Bechtolstein is one of the founders of Arista, and he was one of the founders of Sun. He's an absolute mastermind. And so he, several years ago, started to really envision what we would need to have technology that could scale to the level of AI in the data center. And so they had been doing a lot of the leading edge work to help companies build much larger clusters than were ever dreamed imaginable. And a lot of that has to do with how they're put together, how they're cooled, how they're run by software, things like that. But it's interesting in the sense that Arista is an Ethernet company. And one of the things that NVIDIA did was very tightly integrate with InfiniBand, which is from a company that they had bought. And so there's a
Yeah.
little bit of, you can use open source Ethernet, which I believe and many believe is more capable in the long run, or are you going to be constrained by the pre-integrated GPUs with InfiniBand? And I think there's room for all of it, but we will see shifts over time as Ethernet becomes more capable and scalable in the AI space. And even NVIDIA is building out their own Ethernet capabilities.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Cool. All right. So there's always this kind of debate going on, right? There's all these questions about like the investment that's happening from the hyperscalers, 250 billion a year of CapEx roughly. Like, is it going to pay off, right? So I guess the question I have a little bit is, do you think Gen AI is underhyped or overhyped? And do you think all this investment is justified?
Yeah, I think Gen AI itself is both under and overhyped. And I think there's a lot of wasted investment right now. And let me parse that. In terms of over and underhyped at the same time, definitely the Gen AI capabilities are an exponential step change in what we can do and how we can do it. And very importantly, the reason why people compare it to an iPhone moment is it because, AI has been around for a long time, and even some of the neural networks and some of the large language model capabilities. But with ChatGPT, we made AI acceptable to the masses. And the
Right.
masses said, we will accept it with warts and with flaws and hallucinations. And so that gave companies the permission to experiment and build product with customers instead
Right.
of having to get it perfect first. So that's really important. At the same time, to our earlier conversation, we don't even know yet what it's really going to do from a transformational standpoint. First, we're going to get some productivity enhancements. We're going to get some new things that seem cool and fun. But I really think 3 to 5 years from now, we're going to have the next version of the Ubers of the world where we see transformations we didn't even think to dream of.
Yeah.
The reason why I say there's a lot of money being wasted right now is there's the classic scramble of and FOMO. Nobody wants to be left out. But there's way too many people, in my mind, building foundation models, which are super expensive. There's way too many people building chat bots on top of foundation models with no differentiation that will sustain them long term. There's way too many people spending way too much money on NVIDIA GPUs, which, like I said, in a few years will be one of many, not the only. And so they're paying too much relative to the ROI. So I would recommend anybody who's investing in AI at this point in time be very thoughtful on where that return is going to come, because there is a lot of overfunding and overvaluation, at least from the purview that I have.
Yeah. No, makes sense. I think there is a lot of wise bets, but then, like you said, tons of random and FOMO driving a lot of decisions as well.
Yeah. And even if there's wise bets, did you get in soon enough? Or are you coming in at the peak valuation? Because it
Right.
doesn't
Right.
mean that it's not a great company, but if you're coming in after everybody else already has run up the price, you may be buying high. And even if the company does great things, it may not be a great financial return.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of companies have valuations that exceeding public market, companies,
Yeah.
and they haven't even launched or they've just launched, right? So that success then requires them to be massive companies. Okay, last question here for you. Maybe you can share with us a big and bold prediction for AI and developer tooling. What do you think? Where do you think we are a year from now, the end of 2025?
Yeah. My big and bold prediction is a little bit depressing. I think we're going to
Okay.
hit a bit of a wall. And that's really because in the developer space, that's where everybody, dove in first. And so I think we've seen, just like we saw a lot of productivity enhancements when COVID hit and everybody was working from home and we all figured out how to use Zoom, there was a big productivity gain followed by a lull. I think the same thing is potentially going to happen in 2025 from a coding perspective, because we're going to realize, yeah, it can do a lot of things for us, but it still can't do them perfectly. It can't necessarily do them securely. We've taken out a lot of the low-hanging fruit. The good news is I think that's going to clear the way for us to really understand what is differentiated value and allow the smartest and the brightest of startups and companies to figure out, okay, now that we've cleared out the noise, how are we truly going to drive transformational change in this space, which sets up a great foundation for 2026 and beyond.
Interesting. I actually thought you were going to say that like developers adopted these things more quickly, but like other teams, right? Other groups, right? Let's take other functions like sales and marketing. They may be less urgent. Like they adopt these kind of technologies less urgent. But you're actually saying that, for example, for developers, even just like that last mile of saying, okay, this kind of gives me a good first pass, but getting it to where it actually fully completes the task is still a long ways off.
Yeah, and you get the bulk of your easy gains from the low-hanging fruit. I mean, I will say from the work that I do with sales teams, they're in a similar situation where there's a lot of startups that are coming up with a lot of interesting ideas.
Yeah.
But it is going to take a little bit of time for us to separate out those that are truly transformational, that have the ability to span across multiple points of value for a field organization or a marketing organization or a finance organization. Because at the end of the day, at least where I focus on enterprise, an enterprise can't buy 2,000 tools to run sales.
Right.
And so you can have 2,000 tools being used by your sales force of 10,000 people, but there's going to have to be some rationalization when you actually get it to the enterprise level. And I think that's where we're heading in 2025, is there's still a lot of experimentation. There's still a lot of trying to figure out what works, what doesn't. And then you actually have to get, of the companies that have things that work, who is going to be smart enough on the go-to-market side to really win. Because there's a difference between creating a great product and creating a great company. And that's figuring out the business model and the distribution before the window of opportunity closes.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Thank you so much for your time. It was great to have you, and have a great holiday season.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.